Pretty cool. I don't know if you heard me. I was singing along. So today, I want to talk about inspiration and vision. And I came up with this talk title, The Light in Your Eyes, the Space in Your Heart. Because I had one of those moments when I was on this trip where things made sense in a different way. And the actual concept of having a vision and an intention and for this place, for Unity Center of Des Moines, came to me in a different way. I have a vivid imagination. I see things in the future. It's easy for me to see this church multiplied by 20 and what's going to happen. And I see some of the things I like to envision are the Unity School and year-round summer camp for grown-ups and stuff like that with a whole room. Here's my vision I'm going to share with you. A whole room for sounds, so we never have to put the sound stuff away. A whole room for dances, so we can just leave that set up. Whole other room for art, stuff like that, all over everywhere. I have no problem with coming up with visions. I always have visions for my own life, too. I don't always go to the place that I think, but I'm never at a loss for what should I do next. There's usually 10 or 20 things I might want to do next. And doing some work while I was on our trip, I got hit with what I would call big important vision. And that the reason we're here, the reason I'm here, the reason you're there, not just in the seat in this moment together, but the reason you're born, the reason you're embodied in a body is so that each of us can know the worth of ourselves and every other person on the planet. And I mean every person on the planet, especially the annoying ones, the ones that make your skin crawl, or the ones you're afraid of. That's the vision. It's not a small vision. It's huge, and it's critical. And if there was ever an example, a time when, do you need an example of all the things of why we need this? Everybody in here resonates immediately with why each of us on the planet right now needs to know our worth in a huge, deep way, like our absolute worth, and the worth of every other person now on the planet, and maybe if you're rotating in space on the space station, that too, but everybody. I send out a weekly email, and I'm gonna, if you don't look at the email, you should look at it, because there's a really pretty picture of one of our little kids in Sunday school standing in front of those wings. It's Magda. She's downstairs in the Sunday school right now. But there's a picture of this little girl. Her head doesn't even reach the middle of the heart, she's just underneath it. And her arms are out, and her face is smiling and open, and it is the cutest thing. And when we look at that picture, and we'll make her, when she comes up here, we'll make her stand there so you can look at her. The live is better than the picture. We have no doubt that Magda is an aspect of divinity, right? There is no doubt. You look at that little girl and you go, of course you're an aspect of divinity. Okay? So what about if we put yourself, maybe on a bad hair day, you're standing there, looking schlumpy. You sure you're an aspect of divinity? Or your least favorite person, or really hideous things, people who war criminals, Are we sure they are an aspect of divinity? So here's the vision. I'm going to say it again. The vision that I'm talking about, that I want everyone to embrace, and you will be lifted up if you do, is that we see the worth in ourselves, in each and every person, and we align with our highest self. That's why we're here at Unity Center of Des Moines. We're here to be that and teach that. And as a matter of fact, what I say is not nearly as important in any way as who I am or how I am. Like what I say, I might spend a lot of time figuring out what I'm going to say, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is who I am in my truth up here. The most important thing when Kyle and Brian play is we love their music, but it's who they are. That comes across, who they are. So we want to be and teach the worth of each and every person on the planet. And then we all understand what follows that. If I know the worth and the value of each and every person on the planet, how will that inform my actions? Okay? We recognize that we are created from good, from Christ energy, from pure source, from all that is. And we have the potential to express uniquely. So it's not just I'm here expressing as God. It is that God energy created me and is expressing as me. Uniquely me and uniquely you. So that is also kind of amazing and a miracle. That it really has to be your unique you. Like, you are irreplaceable. You are a diamond in the mosaic that cannot be duplicated. Your diamond cannot be duplicated. You cannot be duplicated. You are a unique and special expression of divinity. Divinity comes through, it's what you're made of, and you are there expressing. Knowing your worth and the worth of everybody on the planet. So that means God expresses as me, Cynthia. Goodness expresses as Roland, my husband, up in the sound booth. Christ frequency expresses as Chris in the bookstore. Buddha energy expresses as Kyle, our song guy. Light expresses as Brian, the drummer. Okay? God, and uniquely God is you. I want to tell you a little bit about my trip. I want to tell you about the highlights and the challenges, and how the trip helped to bring about, the expression of the vision of how important it is that we get this. It is our critical mission. The first thing about traveling for a month is when you're traveling, it really puts you in present time. Especially, it's super fun to go to a new place every couple of days, especially if somebody else works out where you're going. If you don't know where you're going, which happened like once or twice, then I'd have a little fear come up. But since most of the trip, it was all planned for me by other people, it's awesome. You're totally in present time. You go to a place, you take a plane, then you take a bus or a taxi, then you take a train. It was awesome. So it's new and exciting. And you don't know what there is when you go to a new city, a new country you've never been in before. You don't know what there is. So there's a freshness about that. It's pretty exciting to go to a place and find it. And then you go to a different city in the same country, and it's also different. So another highlight is fun. It was fun. It was really fun to be on vacation. It was really fun to be traveling. Roland and I were traveling with friends of ours, Robin and Julie from New Zealand, and Merv from New Zealand. So those all five of us were traveling together for half of the trip. So there's new culture, new food, and let me just say, new appreciation for living in the U.S., for water, for cleanliness, for freedom, healthcare, and for sidewalks that do not have a million, I'm not exaggerating, a million motorbikes parked on them. It was a new appreciation for Des Moines and the United States. So there were beaches and sun. It was kind of jungly. I don't know if it's actually jungle, but tropical. So there were plants everywhere. So there's lots of oxygen everywhere. And there were big cities, two of the biggest cities I've ever been in, Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. That was a good news event. That was a challenge as well as a highlight. But the excitement of being in the city, there's so many young people. I mean, most of the population is 30 and under in all of Vietnam. So you know that, and everybody is in Hanoi. They're very industrious, and it's almost like every square inch somebody is doing something in the city part. Obviously, there's country part. Somebody's doing something. I mean, every square inch. And there's, and the streets are interesting in that, like there really aren't sidewalks. There's just places for motorbikes, so you kind of weave in and out. And one of the most interesting things that I had to overcome was crossing the street, because they're not going very fast, but there's cars, but then there's lots of motorbikes. And the trick was there were no lights in Hanoi, there were very few lights. So, and you can't even tell if you're at a corner or whatever, because it's all weird. So you just have to start crossing, and you cross, and you have to trust them not to hit you. You just have to go, you can't wait for nobody to be there, because that will never happen. You just have to go, and I was terrified at first. It's like, at one point I can remember being on the other side from everybody else, the people I was traveling with, and thinking, I don't want to cross that street. So I just, luckily there was lots of people around, so I just followed someone else. I would kind of throwing out, but I would follow behind someone. Well, they'll hit them first, Seriously, that's how I am. But I knew it was about facing my fear. But it was interesting. Well, it's also exciting to be in a city that alive with lots of people and lots of young people. One of the sweetest things was feeling connected to people and feeling so welcomed. In Vietnam especially, they love Americans. Now, not everywhere you go do you feel that. Like, I've been to Europe and mostly American, It's not like, oh, we're so happy to have you. Sometimes, usually when people know you, that they just love you. Because, when we relate to each other on a personal level, it's okay. But there was something about Vietnam that loves the people. They love Americans, which is pretty interesting considering the war. And more about that. Then I have a story of a highlight of Roland and the Vietnamese vet. Now, you understand that in Vietnam, the war that we call the Vietnam War, they call the American War. Duh. And we went to the War Remnants Museum. And part of why we went there was because Roland's a Vietnam vet, and he wanted to go and reconnect to that country in a different way. Well, the first really sweet story before we went to the museum, we were, the five of us were at a market in Hue, and we decided to send Roland back on a rickshaw kind of thing, because he didn't want to walk, and the rest of us were going to walk. So he got to go ahead, and when we walked up to our hotel, I see Roland sitting in the outside porch with this guy who was a man about his age, who was a Vietnamese veteran from that war. And they were having this kind of sweet connection. I mean, I wasn't in on it. I just heard about it later. The man was in town because his wife had some cancer, and they had to go there for health care. And they were it was this amazing thing of two people obviously, who had, I think he had fought, if he was a North Vietnamese, did he fight? I'm looking up at you. I don't even remember what side he was on. Roland it doesn't even matter, because by now, they're all about forgiveness. They're all about not forgetting and about forgiveness. Okay? And we are not the enemy. So that was a really awesome highlight. I want to talk about some of the challenges, because I learn best by challenges. I find the things that I need to deal with mostly in challenges. I think probably we all do, but it works pretty good for me. So some of the challenges were panic when the taxi driver doesn't know where to take you or know what you're saying because it's a different language. And the phone map you're showing them is in English, and they're like, and you're like, ah. At one point, one of the taxis just stopped working. I mean, it just stopped. And then we're like, what? And here, you have to get out, and then called another one, whatever. It just, I noticed that in moments like that, my fear comes up. I wasn't unsafe, but I still have a control case. Let's just put it that way. So a fear of new, of not knowing. And then when we were with our friends, we had a pretty dramatic loss for them. Our friends Robin and Julie, we were in the third week of our trip, they got notice that their daughter just died. She had an aneurysm. Robin's daughter died. She lives in Kansas City, and she's 25, and that just happens. Sometimes you get an aneurysm and you die. So that changed our trip. They needed to go back and be with her mom and her friends, and they did that. And this isn't my loss because, she's not my daughter, but I do want to say that it was definitely a challenge to recognize the gift of every day. Every time somebody dies, that is what I try to do. Recognize the gift of being here, and of course, we want to connect to our kids. Something happens to somebody's kid, you want to connect to your kids, your loved ones, and that's okay. That's a good thing. Like when somebody has a loss, you love them and you hold them and you support them, and you connect to the people you love because you still have them here. While we're still on earth, we want to connect to each other. So that was one thing that was a challenge. The other thing was looking at poverty and feeling guilty, and going to the War Museum and looking at the perspective. Now, there's what I finally figured out a plan for dealing with the poverty, at least in my own head. It's like, so especially because when you're in a hotel, and there's people who work in a hotel in a country where the wage is not like our wage, and it's a pretty inexpensive hotel for us, but it's nice. It's super nice, and people do your laundry and make your bed, and you have all the water you want and towels, and then you walk outside, and also you can even see from your hotel there's people who do not live like that, and everywhere, and there's people who are, it's so interesting, there are people who, there's street food and street vendors, but then there's people who come up and it's like they're so industrious in a way. There's somebody who's just squatting on the side corner of the road with a little hibachi grill cooking stuff, and then people, come by and buy it. So a lot of, I would say especially in Hanoi, there were so many people not lying around, working, and every inch of that city had somebody who was, making some food or selling, there were people walking by with those baskets of fruit that they would buy from the market, and then the market was huge, just like it was a huge market, but people would go in, buy stuff from the market, and then take it out into the town and sell it. Didn't see anybody lying around, except me, maybe, so but how do you react to feeling guilty for what you have and what other people don't? I don't actually believe that I deserve more stuff than anybody else. It's not true. It's absolutely not true. I became very clear about everybody's worth, and that is how I deal with it. And then the guilt goes away, because I noticed that if I saw somebody who, at first, like I didn't want to look at that. Like it felt painful for me to look at somebody who was sitting with a hibachi selling stuff. That made me feel sad. And then I recognized, well, wait a minute. What if I recognize the worth of that person and appreciate that and appreciate their choices and what they're doing? and know that I can contribute in my way, fair dealings, for one thing. The last thing I want to talk about is the guilt about going to the War Museum. It was a pretty dramatic museum. I didn't post too many pictures of it, but the people who were my age were the last year of the draft in the United States. People who were born in my year did not have to go. They were not drafted. Roland, of course, went and served. And we walked through this museum, and there's a big part of the museum about the effects of Agent Orange on the people of Vietnam. And I don't know if you know, but Roland's cancer was that he had in his leg, which he is gone now. He has healed that. At this moment, there is no cancer in him. Is highly correlated to Agent Orange, just from being around Agent Orange. He didn't even spray; it was just being around it. There's a high correlation of that. But there's the thing that just slayed me was there's a whole room of children's drawings about the effects of Agent Orange, and it's still affected. It's still in some of the people genetically, that causes birth defects and stuff. Well, that was a pretty tough challenge to look at. And Roland we talked about it, and he had a pretty good perspective. He said, I don't feel guilty for being from the United States, for being in that war. I don't feel guilty for being a person of the United States. But if I feel guilt, it is for just being a human, for all of us, for all the humans, for all that we do to each other. And the history of Vietnam, and God knows the history of Cambodia, is full of group after group of people beating up on each other to get land or stuff, in a really terrible way, some hideous ways. And in Cambodia, which was the last place we visited, it was even recent, I had to deal with this was happening in the really terrible, the killing fields of Cambodia happened recently. It's been over for only 20 years. So here's what I want to say about that. If I know the worth of value of each and every person on the planet, that can inform my actions. If that is my vision, and the vision of reaching as many people and convincing them of their actual worth, okay? We all have so much stuff and so much guilt. We were raised by imperfect people, all of us. And we got some stuff along the way. People have treated us unkindly. We have resentments. We have anger. We have unforgiveness in us. But if we hear, and I'm actually speaking about us here in the room, if we hear, who know we are on the spiritual path, to know our worth and our divinity, and also project it outward, and know the worth of every person on the planet, that is how the world changes. That is how we make a world that works for all. That is how we clean up the planet and start behaving in a different way. If I know the worth of every single person on the planet, and I've been to Vietnam and Cambodia, and all of a sudden, and I've seen tons of plastic on the beaches, I'm going to make a different kind of effort to never forget my bags at the grocery store, so they have to give me plastic bags. To really be careful. In Vietnam and Cambodia, you're going to get bottled water, because that's just what you're going to get, because you don't want to drink all of the water all of the time. But here, I don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to always fill up my bottle. Just for example, just a small example of what you do. The big example is I'm on a fiery mission for this message to spread. So I am on a fiery message for a fiery mission for this to spread. That everybody here really gets their worth, their divinity. that everybody here really gets the divinity of everybody on the planet now. So, in closing, I want to say the light in your eyes, the space in your heart. What is the light in your eyes? What is the light in your eyes? It's there. I see it. It shines at me every time I stand up here and look at you. What is the space in your heart? What is the space in your heart? And what is your unique vision that only can be you, that only can be expressed as you? So just as we end, I was wondering if any of the Sunday school people would be willing to stand up against those wings. Anybody want to be an aspect of divinity for us? Thank you. Will you do that, Oma? I would love it if you would do that. Just we're all going to just look at you and appreciate it, because will you stand up against the wings for me? Here, okay. And we're going to notice. Thanks, babe. Anybody who wants to, just, a whole bunch of you can stand up there, actually. Anybody who wants to. So, we were talking about that. You guys stand too. Come on in.